Welcome, dear traders. The week began with the cautions trading for the Asian stock markets following the Moody's statement and in anticipation of a new economic data. Only Japanese stocks were in demand. As a result, the Nikkei index rose by 0.5% and hit a 7-week high early Monday. Moody's downgrade of the US credit rating outlook to negative from a stable and was the biggest news for markets this week. The sharp rise in Treasury yields has increased pre-existing pressure on the US debt affordability, Moody's said. The company announced the decision on November 10, citing a significant increase in debt service costs and political polarization. Notably, other rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, DBRS, Morningstar, have so far maintained stable outlooks on the US credit rating. Most likely, that's why the market's reaction to the Moody's statement was muted, especially as this week could see more important events for both the Asian region and the world. The long-awaited face-to-face meeting between Joe Biden and Xi Jinping will take place on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco. At the meeting, the leaders of the United States and China will discuss a range of global issues, as well as the issue of trade and economic relations between the two countries. In addition, the markets are still reeling from the comments made by the head of the Federal Reserve. Last week, Jerome Powell said that the fight against inflation in the United States was not over, and this means that even a softer CPI reading, which will be released tomorrow, will not mean a halt to rate hikes. The hawkish statement from the Fed chief dragged the US dollar to almost 106 points on Thursday. Since then, the greenback has been consolidating at this level, but it starts the week with a moderate decline. The US dollar index was trading in Asia within the range of 105.70 and 105.90. By the way, the markets will hear the view of several more Fed officials this week. Most likely, the speakers will support the hawkish outlook and thus strengthen the US currency. After all, as long as inflation has not fallen to 2%, it's not in the US regulators' interest to talk about easing monetary policy at all. However, the Japanese yen's strengthening against its US counterpart did not prevent it from setting a new low for the year at 151.78. The pair has been rising since November 9, supported by higher US Treasury yields. On a Monday, despite the dollar's weakness, the dollar-yen pair was still under the influence of a bullish momentum and moved within the boundaries of 151.30 and 151.80. In general, the pair remains in the growth zone for the 6th consecutive day. In addition, new data on the US CPI and the GDP may increase the rate of the greenback this week. Meanwhile, the pair may soar to the critical level of 152. On the other hand, further depreciation of the Japanese currency may limit the potential intervention of Japan in the forex market. In particular, the Bank of Japan considers excess volatility of its exchange rate to be the main threat to the yen. While the markets are consolidating in anticipation of important news and statistics, there are no big jumps in currency trading. Today, against the backdrop of a rise in Treasury yields and some weakness in the US dollar, the antibody currencies do not trend to grow either. However, the Australian dollar showed a bullish momentum, and in Monday's trading rose above 0.6370. In general, the Australian currency, among other things, lost ground after the statement of the country's central bank last Friday, and the Reserve Bank of Australia released the minutes from its November meeting. It turned out that policymakers were considering a pause in interest rates as a possible option. As a result, the Aussie began the week continued its weekly decline, trading within a daily range of 0.6352 and 0.6378. In addition, the OSC has long been overshadowed by China's weak economy. The Chinese economy's recovery has still holding back the Australian market. Given Australia's heavy dependence on its largest trading partner, the OSC losses on this lag both as a proxy of the yuan and as a commodity currency. The New Zealand dollar has the same troubles as its American counterpart. However, the dependence of the country's market on China is even stronger. Besides, internal problems, together with a negative forecast of the global economy, have been putting pressure on the New Zealand dollar for 6 consecutive sessions. Therefore, the Kiwi did not change its trajectory and continued to decline within the range of 0.5882 and 0.5902. And that's all for now. Stay tuned for more updates with the InstaForex TV. We appreciate your feedback. Please leave your questions and comments below. So see you soon.